First is Professor Mary Nolan, known to us as Molly, a professor of history emerita at New York University. She is perhaps most well known for her wonderful book, Visions of Modernity, American Business, and the Modernization of Germany, about post-war social and economic transformations in Germany. She would describe herself as a labor and social historian of Germany, but she has also co-edited Crimes of War, Guilt and Denial in the 20th Century. And her most recent book is The Transatlantic Century, Europe and America, 1890 to 2010, with Cambridge University Press. I don't know if other people have noticed, but I've noticed that Molly speaks in paragraphs. She thinks in paragraphs, not sentences. So get ready for some spectacular syntax.
Thank you. First, thank you to all the organizers for such a provocative and interesting conference, particularly Sky, who has done so much to keep us on target and provide so many wonderful meals and activities. Okay, I received Jennifer Evans's fascinating and thought-provoking paper on the eve of the November 5th U.S. elections. Being rather depressive and pessimistic by nature, I anticipated that Trump was going to win. What I did not anticipate was the magnitude of his victory. It was not the landslide he claims it was, but he did win 50% of the popular vote, and right-wing Republicans control the House and the Senate. There are no checks and balances. Like so many feminists and leftists, I am very afraid of what will happen next. Claims of American exceptionalism insist that the U.S. is immune from authoritarianism, let alone fascism, but a host of recent and very interesting historical works have uncovered a long illiberal tradition in the United States and explored and analyzed right radical and fascist movements of all sorts. This is the context in which I wrote my response to Jen's paper and helps you understand why it concentrates on the current moment and the U.S. We've noted that in the Stanford seminar, there was no talk about women, gender, and sexuality, not so surprising given the context. Since then, there's been an enormous amount of really fruitful work done on so many aspects of gender and sexuality in the Third Reich and in works like Dagmar's in its afterlives post-World War II. These show the importance of looking at gender and sexuality to understand the dynamics and the appeals of fascism. Yet this seems to be a lesson that is hard for many to learn. I have been struck by how many commentators, mostly male, who feature prominently in the growing public and scholarly debates about right radical populism, and that's the term I tend to use for what some call late fascism or post-fascism, in its various iterations around the globe. These commentators ignore or completely downplay gender, sexuality, and debates about family. They analyze the resurgent right in terms of neoliberalism, globalization, immigration, and real or imagined threats to national cultures. They critique liberal failure to address these issues and the resulting disillusionment with democracy. Many recognize that if one wants to talk about fascism or potential fascism today, one must talk about capitalism. But there is a reluctance to accord the same status to gender, sexuality, or patriarchy. There is a stubborn refusal to see, to quote Aniszka Graf and Elżbieta Korochuk, who have written a very interesting study of anti-gender politics in the populist moment. They insist, and I quote, that gender is no distraction from real politics. It resides in the heart of politics today, both as a set of specific policy issues and as the nexus of symbolic struggles, end quote. Jennifer's paper suggests how analytically short-sighted and politically dangerous it is to dismiss sexuality if we wish to understand the appeals of fascism then and right radical populism now. It is insufficient to focus on interests, whether rational and conscious or misperceived, and to ignore emotions, desires, the fears and fantasies of private life, the multiplicity of possible sexualities. To understand modernity's authoritarian potential and the illiberalism of liberalism she posits, we need to explore, and I quote, conversations about race, gender outlaws, and sexual desire, end quote. Jennifer's provocative and original paper explores the questions of continuities and returns of repressive attitudes toward gender and sexuality and linkages made or downplayed with fascism. She looks at which queer sexualities were deemed respectable and which not, and whether some were considered conducive to fascism. She focuses on left intellectuals, feminists, and the gay LGBTQ community, rather than on the more predictable views of the right. She concludes in the written version by noting that in Germany and across Europe, as well as in the US, there is a fear of too much pluralism, a growing critique of identity politics, and a rejection of gender theory. To quote her again, a multi-pronged racial agenda based around desire has ceded space to a single-issue politics of rights, respectability, and national belonging in support of the free market, end quote. I will leave it to others who are more versed in intellectual and cultural history than I am to comment on the particular intellectuals that you look at and analyze so deftly. What I want to do in my time is raise a couple of more general issues. The first is, why is it that both trans as a concept and embodied existence and an interest in trans people has been an aspect, that these have been an aspect of post-war decades, your paper shows. But why are they featuring so prominently in current public debate now, as opposed to in the classical form of fascism and the run-up to it? It seems to me there are several possible answers, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. One has to do with the very success of feminism and especially the visibility of queer politics in recent decades, as opposed to the interwar years. This has, I think, served as a catalyst for backlash. A second possible reason, and this goes back to something that Enzo raised in his talk, lies in the absence of a left of an organized and powerful sort comparable to that which existed in the 1920s and early 30s in either Europe or the US. Right radical politics needs an enemy or enemies, internal as well as external, against whom to define a people's community and national identity. Socialism and communism are hardly viable or persuasive ones these days. That leaves immigrants and trans as candidates, or trans plus gender ideology with which it is always linked. For these are said to present similar challenges to normative sexuality and family, to society, religion, and the nation as right radical populism defines it. In the interwar years, crisis and catastrophe were imagined primarily as economic or military, as political, with sexual anxieties there, but more in the background. Now, for many on the radical right, crisis begins at home or in the bed. Their arguments move from condemnations of non-normative sex, transness, abortion, and alternative family forms to the catastrophic end of the nation and the Christian West in a single paragraph, indeed, often in a single sentence. A third explanation for the prominence of these issues on the part of the right may lie in the way trans people challenge deeply held beliefs in the naturalness of and the immutability in a biologically based sexual binary. Nature is a favorite word on the right in reference to gender and sexuality, for it can reference either natural law or biology or both, and implies something that is self-evident, just common sense. trans people challenge this binary more fundamentally, I think, than feminists or things like gay marriage. Trans women, and they do seem to be the main preoccupation in public debates, reject masculinity in all its forms, even as they are denied recognition as real or material, and these are the terms used, women, by conservative Catholics, evangelical Protestants, right-wing populists, and trans-exclusionary radical feminists. Finally, I think we have the prominence of anti-trans and anti-gender politics because it has been successfully promoted by the cooperation of two different groups. On the one hand, the religious right, Catholic and in the US primarily, but not exclusively, evangelical Protestant, for whom these beliefs about what is wrong with so-called gender ideology and transness are regarded as God-given truths, and radical populists who may or may not actually believe in them, but are certainly willing to weaponize the attack on transness and gender ideology. There's a kind of opportunistic synergy between them. These two groups have pushed the trans issue more vigorously than the left has worked to counter it. In the recent US election, for example, there was both a large and visible movement for trans rights and a right-wing weaponization of the issue. Roughly 40% of Trump's TV ads in the month before the election focused on the trans question. Think of the infamous but also effective ad depicting Kamala Harris with the slogan, "Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you." A second question involves not when trans issues in particular are prominent, but where. They are certainly highly visible in the US and the UK, but they don't seem to always resonate quite so much in other contexts, although I would appreciate hearing from you whether my sense of that is right. Graf and Korosik, in their study of anti-gender politics, argue that anti-gender politics are shaped by and address different national history and contemporary politics. In Poland, with its once powerful Catholic Church and communist past, it is abortion, homosexuality, and sex education that are the main targets. In France and Italy, it seems to be more opposition to gay marriage, adoption, and surrogacy that take center stage. Across Europe, of course, there are fears about women of the dominant or approved ethnicity not having enough children and Europeans being, quote unquote, replaced. And so too is a shared opposition to the Council of Europe's Istanbul Convention against violence against women. And domestic violence. So, this suggests we need to both see what is common in this generic anti-genderism and the way it takes on particular forms on the micro level. Third, I want to ask how we might further investigate how linkages get made between queer politics, trans issues, and so-called gender ideology on the one hand, and threats to or defense of liberal democracy and national identity on the other. It seems to me that the right has developed its arguments much more successfully and dangerously than the center left. The linkages made on the right are more long-standing and capacious, whether as laid out by the Vatican since the 1990s or elaborated by evangelical Protestants in the US and abroad. They insist that there is a natural and immutable sexual binary that dictates only one normative sexuality, that within a heteronormative family, which in turn is the basis of an ordered society and polity, and necessary to defend the nation and Christian civilization. As they move from the micro to the macro, the right condemns all threats to this chain of assumed truths and relationships, whether from feminists, queers, or immigrants. Right radical populists adopt these linkages, whether from conviction or opportunism, because they help promote their broader project of authoritarianism, illiberalism, xenophobia, and racism, and Christian nationalism. And the religious cooperation with radical right populism gives the latter an added respectability, so both benefit from it. And the question is, how can we, as well as, more centrist liberals, but feminist, queers, leftists of all sorts, better respond? Because I think the right has done a better job saying why we have to, why it's necessary to repress all these ideas and behaviors than the left has in arguing why defending them is necessary to create the kind of society that we want, and to make those arguments in the emotionally resonant way that the right seems to be making counter-arguments. Okay. If the goals of conservative Catholicism, fundamentalist Protestantism, and right radical populism are broadly consistent, the particular issues they single out are often selected in an exceedingly opportunistic way. And this has been true in project I've been involved in, collecting lots of materials on the culture wars against higher education. Now it's critical race theory, then it's LGBTQ, then it's diversity, equity, inclusion. The issues don't matter, but they will weaponize anything they can. Something similar is happening with arguments about sexuality, gender, and family. If all trans rights in the U.S. were eliminated tomorrow, the right would hardly be content. After all, they are still attacking abortion rights, policing school curriculum to eliminate discussions of race, sex, gender, and accurate history, and banning as many books as they possibly can from schools and public libraries. The Trump regime, with the help of a deeply conservative Supreme Court, may well, having already reversed Roe v. Wade, may well again outlaw gay marriage and adoption and further bolster the rights of businesses to discriminate against anyone identified as LGBTQ. Project 2025 captures these multiple targets. Project 2025 is a 900-plus page plan to reform, transform, or gut the federal government, considered by the right-wing Republicans as the despicable deep state. The Heritage Foundation, one of the most prominent and well-funded right-wing think tanks, commissioned and published Project 2025, whose detailed plans for each and every federal agency were written by dozens and dozens of right-wing luminaries and policy wonks. In painful detail, these authors, many of whom are being appointed to positions in the Trump cabinet and certainly on many lower levels, offer detailed plans for each and every federal agency. Okay. In painful detail, the authors lay out cuts to innumerable policies and benefits and prescribe cruelties to innumerable groups. The authors of Project 2025 are particularly obsessed with sexuality, gender, and the family. In every section, be it on the Department of Defense, foreign aid, education, labor, Health and Human Services, there are calls to eliminate any trans protections and rights and purge the bureaucracy of any trans employees. But Project 2025 does not stop there. Its attack on queer politics and practice is part of a broader attack on gender ideology. It wants to forbid any use of the terms sexual orientation or gender identity, anything that can smack of social or cultural constructionism. It also wants to prohibit any references to gender equality, gender equity, and reproductive rights. The givenness of our nature as men and women, and this is a recurring phrase, must be accepted, and social constructionism and gender fluidity condemned. Likewise, each agency is called upon to protect women, children, and the family understood in heteronormative terms. As among right radical populists in Europe, the trope of the innocent child in need of protection appears frequently. Abortion is to be outlawed and schools purged of any discussion of gender, as well as, of course, critical race theory. And all diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are to be eliminated. Heritage Foundation head Kevin Roberts, in his introduction to Project 2025, listed 4 tasks the right needs to accomplish to realize its desired future. The first of which is, quote, restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children, unquote. Thereafter comes dismantling the administrative state, defending sovereign borders and warding off global threats, and finally securing God-given individual rights to live freely. Classical fascism sought to insert the family into the state. Okay, I think I'm doing fine. Think of Mussolini's everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. Current right radicals simultaneously want to get the state out of the family in the name of parental and patriarchal rights and family autonomy, and want the state to proscribe actively family forms, sexualities, and threats to Christian values. In Europe, right radicals insist the state must subsidize the prescribed kind of heteronormative family that is desired. In the US, the right, by and large, preaches family self-sufficiency, although some are now saying, look, if we really want to impose this conservative agenda, we're going to have more state subsidies. The sweeping attack on what is lumped under the head of gender ideology is hardly unique to the US. Virtually every country has conservative, religious, and right radical populist political organizations who push anti-genderism, and there is a richly developed transnational network whose most visible coordinators are the Vatican, the International Organization of Families, and Citizen Go. Nationally and transnationally, the attacks on gender ideology and transness are, I think we can think of them as a gateway drug that lead individuals to other aspects of the radical right, like authoritarianism, racism, and Christian nationalism. The attacks on gender ideology are also, and one can track this in looking at center-right parties in Europe, pushing centrist parties further to the right. Okay. The challenge, it seems to me, for feminists, queers, progressives, leftists, is to understand why these regressive and repressive attacks on everything encompassed by what the right understands as gender ideology. Why are these so appealing? Is it the way that the right seems to link the real economic anxieties which seem beyond control, neoliberalism, the commodification of everyday life, the growing precarity of employment, shrinking safety nets, to the imagined security of stabilized heteronormative families, in the elimination of multiple sexual and familial forms that are simultaneously to many frightening and appealing? Is it that the radical right offers a clear version of traditional femininity, or rather 2 versions? Some really want to push the trad wife, non-working. Others, particularly, people like Marie Le Pen, ideally that would happen. Women should stay home, have babies, but we know that's not possible. So it's a sort of modern traditional where women will move in and out of the labor force. They offer that to women, 2 possible models, and they offer men more than one possible model of masculinity. The empowered patriarch firmly in control of wife and children, the more transgressive, toxic, and misogynistic masculinity of Trump rallies, the nostalgic petromasculinity, as one scholar has labeled it, of manliness, motoring, and manufacture. Less clear they put much weight on a militaristic model of masculinity, although Amy King's depiction of these rallies makes me think, on parts of the radical right, that is certainly very much there. Is the appeal that the right names concrete enemies to hate, immigrants, feminists, queers, rather than abstract ones like capitalism. It defines a microsphere, the right does, in which people feel they can fight and over which they can hope to exert control. The family or the local school board, for example, rather than a micro one. The right offers people a recognition of and an outlet for their rage the progressives have not provided. And it offers a concrete sphere, however small, in which people feel they can participate and exert power and often practice cruelty. How do we respond? That is, I think, the challenge before us. We cannot retreat, tempting as it is in the face of the depressing political situation and progress of the right globally, but we have a lot of hard thinking to do collectively to figure out effective responses. Thank you.